Oh, we're live.
Oh, we are live. Hello, you guys. Good evening. This is, of course, Tita Lavinia of Titas of Pageantry. And I have a beautiful, beautiful guest this rainy evening. I have Miss Victoria Velasquez Vincent. Good evening,
Hello.
Victoria.
Hello, Tita. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to this. Now, this is actually my first time to use the um, YouTube function of StreamYard. So I'm going to check if this is actually working. Riri of Titas of Pageantry, is it working? You guys who are watching on YouTube, is it working? It is working. I saw myself in another screen. All right. So we now have 89 viewers, Victoria. So please greet them this rainy evening.
Hello to all of you. I'm sure many of you are probably my Victorians. Hello, and thank you so much for all of your support so far. I'm sure my mom and dad are also watching. Hi, mom. Hi, dad. I miss you very much. And to
Hi.
those of you who may not know who I am and you're just here to see Tita Lavinia, hi, I'm V. Nice to meet you.
Of course, they didn't just come for me. They came from you, for you.
Yes.
You are highly requested. I mean, you have maintained your mystery up until they announced your name as an official candidate. So, without further ado, let's read some of the comments here because I know a lot of them are super mesmerized by your beauty. So, let's go ahead and greet some of these beautiful folks. Luis Manzana is saying, "Hi, Tita. Hi, Triple V. OMG, rooting for you, gorgeous." Ayan.
Thank
So
you.
guys,
Thank you so much.
as early as now ha, tulong-tulong na tayo kay Victoria. Matindi ang ating kalaban. Vote-vote ang ating beauty ngayon. So, Bella Chow is saying, ang ganda-ganda talaga niya. O, diba? Ang aliwalas. Um, guys, before I start this, I just want to make kwento how this interview came about. Because as you know, I've been interviewing a number of personalities, maybe not as actively as the other vloggers out there, but I did take a chance on Victoria. I wanted to get first dibs because usually I don't. Usually I wait for the others to conduct their interviews and then maybe I'll slip in a DM. And a few weeks ago, I messaged you. And Victoria politely declined because at that time you weren't an official candidate yet. So I was really, really surprised that not 24 hours after the announcement, she DMs me and says, "Tita, are we still on for that interview?" And I was like, oh,
Mm,
nakakatuwa tong taong to because it's very rare for candidates to, have that rapport. It's very rare for the candidates to make the next move. So I really appreciate this. Thank you. Thank you so much for
no,
getting
thank
back to
you.
me and
I'm
not
very
just,
much a
seeing zone me.
ghosting you. I'm very much a
Yes.
woman of my word, I guess you could say. And so, if I tell you I'm gonna do something, I'll do it. So
Ayan. Ayan
I'm
naman
big on
pala. So sa
promises.
mga nakapila, ayan. So for those of you who are on queue waiting for an interview with Victoria, yeah, I'm gonna share her with you. But for now, we want to know, Victoria. Can you please tell us a little bit about your background beyond what has been written on, those short clips on social media and those short articles on social media?
Sure, sure. So I'll incorporate that information as well because it's kind of the basis of who I am.
Yeah.
But I am 25 years old, and my father is Irish, but he was born and raised in New Zealand, and my mom is Filipino. She was born in Pasay, and I was raised in New Zealand. Lucky for me. Obviously, New Zealand is an incredibly progressive country, and I had the privilege of growing up there, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And I've always, so every year I come back and forth to the Philippines, and the
Mhm.
Philippines has always felt more like home to me. And so I always knew that someday I would end up moving here. And for some reason, I don't know why, but I decided to do it during the middle of a pandemic,
I know.
and yeah, some people think, some people say I'm brave, some people say I'm crazy. I might be both of those
Crazy.
things. But, I I have a dream and I have a purpose, and that's ultimately why I am here. And although I could have waited for next year, or the year after that, I was sick of letting things get in the way. But yeah, so I studied architecture and heritage conservation, which you will have seen all over the social media platforms.
Social media.
Uh, mm. And I graduated or I finished university in 2019. And since then, I have been working in project management just because I wanted to get more of a holistic view of the construction process. And also, I needed to save up a little bit of money before I moved my entire life overseas. What else is there to tell you about me? I am a lover of animals. I grew up on what we call the Vincent family farm. So I think the most animals we had at one time was like 2 donkeys, 5 cats, 3 or 4 dogs.
Wow.
So yes, I love animals. They've always been a big part of my life, but now I live alone with no one, and it's kind of upsetting. What else is there to tell you about me? I lived in Sydney for about 9 or 10 months, and I worked in project management there. But I relocated back to New Zealand. Ooh, sorry, that was very loud. I relocated back to New Zealand just before the pandemic, actually. Timing was just perfect. It all happened in my favor. And I got to move back with my family. And yeah, after spending almost a year in New Zealand during the pandemic, which I was very lucky to do because obviously New Zealand didn't experience too much
Super
of the
safe.
pandemic
Yeah.
compared to everyone else. Yeah, I decided that I wasn't willing to wait any longer to pursue my dreams and to do what I knew in my heart was my purpose. So here I am.
Gosh, I am listening to you and I am reading the comments. They are mesmerized by your classic, beautiful face and your
Mm.
voice. I mean, these folks are suckers for the accent. So it's very sexy. That's why I just allowed you to speak. So
Sexy.
guys, happy na kayo? Narinig niyo na ba siya? Ayan. So
Sorry, Tita, I should have asked before. Am I able to see the comments as well? Do I need to press something or do I not do that?
no,
Okay.
you can if you watch from another phone or another screen via Facebook.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay.
Yan. So let's go back a little bit to that decision to move here. Was it because you were thinking of pursuing your pageant dream, or was it because of work primarily?
So I'm sure this is going to be a question that eventually gets asked. How I eventually got into pageantry and how
Yeah.
I am now competing for Miss Universe Philippines. So about, when was it? Over a year ago now. So I think around Feb 2020. I was messaged on Instagram by someone from the camp because I had
Okay.
followed them. Every time it comes down to pageant season, I always follow all the new pageant pages and everything. And I had
Talaga?
followed the camp. Yeah, yeah. I've actually
Talaga?
always, I won't tell you that I've been watching pageants since I was a little girl because that's not the case. But ever since around when Pia won, I think that was the first time that I actually watched a pageant. I remember sitting in my lounge with my parents watching that very controversial moment. But ever since then, yeah, I always used to, just follow and keep up with what was going on, especially because of how much I love the Philippines as well. And so, yeah, I happened to follow the camp, and then someone from the camp messaged me, and yeah, everything just kind of happened from there. And like I said, I could have put it off for next year or the year after that, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. You know what I mean? You got to take the risks to reap the rewards and to, you know, pursue your purpose in that way. Mm-mm.
Wow, very interesting because this was also something that I asked the other girls. There was someone who um, was scouted while she was buying shoes from a popular pageant shoe shop.
Oh,
And
wow.
of course, the others, yeah, she was tapped because she was tall and everything. And then there was, of course, the classic story of waiting for pageant girls to join local pageants and then invest more time in them up until they join the nationals. But in your case, it's very similar to the girl who was in the shoe shop. So you were tapped by people from the camp. And may I just say, the camp, of course, is pretty new. They
Mm.
just started last year, but they have been very, very successful. All of the girls that they groomed for Miss Universe Philippines placed. So this time around, you are with the camp. If you don't mind me asking, Victoria, are you training on your own or do you have others training with you? Because I know Christelle is also still part of the camp, right? And then she also was accepted as an official candidate. Do you have other members this time?
Yeah, so it's Christelle, myself, and Ingrid Santa Maria. We call her Sam. It's kind of her nickname, but
Ah,
officially her
okay.
name is Ingrid. Yeah, those are my
So
two
tatlo
twin
pa
sisters.
rin.
Mm-mm.
I see. So I think this is a really good way to stay focused on the girls because we have a number of camps in the Philippines, and the more established ones, they train a number of girls. But in this case, there are only three of you. How do you feel when you now that you have to really start your training? You are now an official candidate. What's the dynamics like?
Within the camp, honestly, we are like one big family, and everyone, each of our coaches or mentors, they all have their own, what do you call it? Their own role to play. You know what I mean? So I go to different ones for different, whether it be an issue or things that I need. And then we also have group chats that we all chat in, and the support is really, it's incredible, really, and especially for myself and for Sam, this is our first national pageant.
Yes. Oo.
Sorry, Ingrid. I've got to get used to calling her Ingrid.
Ako rin eh.
It's really helpful to have so many people who are so knowledgeable and so well connected in the pageant industry, I guess you call it. So yeah, no, it is going to be a very long and overwhelming journey, but I am comforted to know that I have a great team of people behind me.
Yeah. So, a lot of people are so excited, and I guess it has something to do with really watching out who pursues their Miss Universe dreams. And a lot of the folks that you're up against are known personalities in pageantry. Some of them are personalities from show business, but I feel the clamor because you're new, you're fresh. There's very little we know about you up until tonight. So, how do you feel that these people are rallying for you and they don't even know you?
Honestly, it really, there's no other way to describe it that it warms my heart. It truly does, especially coming from New Zealand. We have a population of 5 million people roughly. Our celebrities aren't really like big time celebrities, and there's no such thing as like fan pages and all these things. So this whole world is just so new to me, but it's so heartwarming, and I feel so welcomed into the pageant world. You know what I mean? Even though I am what they call a pageant newbie, I feel so welcomed, and to know that so many people are supporting me, it gives me a lot more drive, and it gives me a lot more confidence as well. So,
All right. So, Victoria, when you were approached by a member of the camp, did you
mhm.
have any apprehensions, or was this something that you thought you could actively pursue? I mean, is this something that you've been planning on and then everything just fell into place with that phone call or that message?
Honestly, getting into pageantry and more specifically Miss Universe Philippines, or back then it was Beanie Beanie a long time ago.
Mhm.
It's always been something that I've considered, and
Mhm.
something that I knew I could use as a platform to really push for the things that I believe in. But the thing
Okay.
is, especially because coming from New Zealand, pageants are definitely just like, I mean, we have pageants, but they're very low key, So I didn't even, I wouldn't even know where to start. I didn't know anything about pageant camps. I didn't know about, all these strategies and everything that you would have to have. I didn't realize how full on it would be. So I was just really grateful that someone from the camp reached out to me, because even though it was something I always wanted to do, it probably wouldn't have been something I would have actively pursued to do if no one had approached me, if that makes sense.
I see. Okay. All right.
Mm-mm.
Did you have any apprehensions though? What about your family? Because
Mm,
I you mentioned you were considering this in the middle of the pandemic while everything is just a little difficult. Mobility is difficult. Making these decisions to move from one country to another is difficult. What about your family? How did they take this or accept this? And are they supportive of what it is you're doing right now?
My family, they are so incredibly supportive. Even though even if they may not necessarily do something themselves, if it's something that I want to do, they will always, stand by my side and support me along the way. And yeah, there was a lot of, honestly, fear, mostly because of the pandemic. And then also, not just because of that, but moving away from my entire support network, my family, my parents who were literally my best friends. So yeah, there was a little bit of apprehension. There was a lot of fear, to be honest. But I knew that it would always be worth it. And I knew that because I was always planning on moving to the Philippines eventually, regardless of if I pursued pageantry. And, that whole year, the first year of COVID, I was just like, oh, maybe this is a sign that I shouldn't do it yet. But, I got to the point where I was just like, I'm 25 now. I can't keep putting things off. I've just got to go and live out my dream. So.
Okay, so now I am going to read this comment by JCMC, and he mentioned napaka-unique ng advocacy niya. And we haven't even gotten into your advocacy, and I think now is a good time for us to talk about it because it might allow us to segue into something that I know a lot of people have read about when it comes to you. Please let us know what are your social causes for this competition.
So, for me, the advocacy that I have within this competition is not just within the bounds of the competition. It's something that I want to pursue long term. It's something that I see as being my lifelong, sounds so cliche, but lifelong purpose. And
Okay.
and it's all related back to what I studied in architecture school. I did a thesis at the end of my master's degree, and
Mhm.
it focused on, so we could pick any topic we wanted, and it focused on using architecture as a tool to help solve social issues. So obviously, living in a country like the Philippines, unfortunately, we aren't classified as, a first world country, and there are a lot of people that are living in underprivileged communities. And
Mhm.
for me, I think people underestimate the power that architects have to help not necessarily solve these issues because it's not something that you can solve overnight. You know what I mean? It's a very long term problem, but architects have the power to help aid in pushing that problem to eventually be solved. And so that's something that I want to do. I know that architects can design low cost, they can design sustainably, especially, in the Philippines, we experience so many typhoons. So people that are living in these underprivileged communities, in these, makeshift houses, when it comes to natural disasters, they have to continue to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild, and they get stuck
Mhm.
in this endless cycle that they can't get out of. Whereas if there were more people focused on designing and building sustainable homes that were catered for our climate and the issues that the Philippines has, then I really think we would be able to really push to help people get out of that cycle, if that makes sense.
It does. It's actually quite fitting for us to talk about this right now because we are in the middle of a typhoon right now. And just before going live, I was actually watching the news, and parts of the city is already flooded. I'm sure within a few days we will have more news of people who are devastated in the provinces. So,
Mm-mm.
just at the top of your head, I know that this type of question requires a lot of discussion, requires a lot of like research, and there is no actual answer to solve this. But seeing that you've been spending quite some time here in the Philippines, you are exposed to living conditions or whatever it is that you've been observing, what could be, at the top of your head, a good solution at least for the housing issues? And let me throw this one in a little bit because one of the things that I'm passionate about is tiny house living. I just am not so sure why this idea hasn't caught on in the Philippines. Is there something that you would like to add to this?
So for me, the main thing when it comes to designing homes in the Philippines or anywhere else for that matter is that they really have to take into consideration the people that are actually going to be using it. And Filipinos, we have a very particular way of living, whether it be, within a short time frame or within the long term. So, for example, my thesis, I'll just chuck this in. My thesis was a series of modular designs, and they had the
Mm-hmm.
potential to, so you could add on to them because they were modular. You could add on to them over time because, as we know, Filipinos, we like to live together as a family. You know what I mean? And I
Right,
know that,
right.
for me, if my parents were living in the Philippines, I would be living with them, and then eventually, if I were to move out and have my own family, when my parents get older, they would then move back in with me. It's just like the dynamic of the Filipino family. It's really just to stay together because of how important family is to us. And so I think designing for Filipinos is really the most important thing. And then also designing using local materials but modern technology, if that makes sense. Just so that we can create designs that are really catered to our climate and also
Right.
uh, make use of the materials that we do have rather than trying to import things and trying to use materials that historically Filipinos haven't used. So that's just my opinion. And then also
Well,
with the whole environmental side of things, passive design is also an important thing, which is something I also incorporated into my thesis. But that's something I'm going to eventually start rolling out and showing people.
because yeah, I checked your Instagram page and you did post something about it was like an aerial shot of I don't know, is that like
Taytay,
an
Rizal.
area that you were working on? Right. So
Mm-mm.
yeah, very interesting. Now, I have this comment from Mark Gonzalez. Let's see if I can read this one. He asks, or yeah, he asked, recently the Metropolitan Theater in Manila had completed its reconstruction and will be open to the public soon. What other old buildings in the PH do you want to undergo reconstruction or rehabilitation? I'm not so sure if you have gone around or if this is now part of your study, but we do have amazing structures here in the Philippines that, particularly in Manila, unfortunately, we never really got around restoration right after World War II. But with you, if you have gone around, are there other structures that you would like to work on or people to focus on?
So for me, I haven't actually managed to, obviously, I moved here in the middle of the pandemic, and in the years that I did travel back here, I mostly went to the islands or stayed in Cavite with my family. So I'm not entirely privy to all of the historic architecture here. And from my point of view, this is also something that I'm incredibly passionate about. Obviously, through centuries of colonization, the Philippines has almost lost our sense of architectural identity. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So a
Yeah,
lot of our
I agree.
architecture, our modern
Mm-mm.
architecture, or anything aside from our classic Bahay Kubo, our Nipa huts, they're very everything's very much inspired by the Spanish or even the Japanese, the Americans, and so we've lost our sense of architectural identity. So from my point of view, I am really passionate about exploring the potential that we have to incorporate design elements from indigenous Filipino architecture into modern day architecture. So that's something that I really want to push for. But of course, the historic architecture that we do have is a representation of our history. So yeah, by all means, we should rehabilitate and reconstruct and put to use adaptive reuse. I'm not sure if you are aware of adaptive reuse. I think that's also a really important part of
A new concept,
developing
actually.
heritage. Mm.
Okay, well, this face is smiling. This is my thing. I really hope that you get the chance to really work on like these projects. I mean, eventually, if you're going to pursue this, I mean, it's a really good mindset, especially when you said that architects, they have the potential to really help out. And when we say architect here in the Philippines, we just usually see a dollar sign or those amazing architects with those amazing houses. So I am really on board with the idea of giving back or
Mm-mm.
trying to help out. Actually, there was a comment here earlier, but it got lost because we do have a lot of comments coming in. But there was a mention also of rehabilitating hospitals. I think this is something that a lot of people are talking about now, especially because a lot of people are spending more time in hospitals, nowadays. So
Mm-mm.
yeah, a lot of people who are commenting are very impressed. So
Mm.
far so good. All right, so I kind of also like that you're not really very pushy in saying these things. Like there is a level of finesse, there is a level of, something that's very nurturing. So, you as a person, are you usually this chill? Because when I started looking at your photos, I initially thought of someone with a deeper voice, with, you know, someone who's like super commanding, and I was like, will I buckle this time? But you're just so chill and so calm. And is it the New Zealand thing?
It could be, there's very much two sides to me. There is my very chill, laid back New Zealand side, but then there's also my Virgo side. I was born in September. I
Oh,
am the epitome of a Virgo. And so, I'm the kind of person, I know that not everything can be controlled, but I love to control the controllables. And so, yeah, I'm very particular about things. But when it comes to, just conversing with people and meeting people, I think I'm very much Kiwi in that way.
right. Because,
Mm-mm.
yeah, one of my careers, one of my jobs back then was, yeah, I spent a considerable amount of time as a call center agent. And I remember moving, of course, from one job to another. But when I started learning or tapping the New Zealand market, because this is a market that allowed us to work in the mornings, not to work at
Mm.
night, they've become my favorites because these people are just so easy to talk to. These people aren't very pushy with what they want. Tell us more about the people in New Zealand and your environment growing up. Is this really part of like how you honed your character, or is this more on your Filipino side?
It's funny. When I living in New Zealand, I always almost felt a little bit out of place, especially as someone who is mixed race. And
Okay.
New Zealand is an incredibly multicultural country, which is amazing. But, especially
Mhm.
like in high school, there was always, like the Europeans, they would kind of stick together, the Asians would kind of stick together. And I was kind of like that person in between that didn't perfectly fit into either of those groups. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right. Yeah.
And so I always felt like growing up when I was younger, I always felt a little bit of like identity confusion, if that makes sense, just because I didn't know quite where I fit in. But then it got to the point where I kind of became the person that brought, the different cultures together. And, my friend group was very much multicultural. And so, yeah, sorry, to answer your question, growing up, I really felt out of place because my values and who I am as a person is very much mostly defined by my mom, I think, obviously because
Okay.
I'm the bunso, I'm her baby, I'm her daughter, and
Hi.
and we were very close when I was growing up, and so her Filipino values are very much instilled in me, and so that's another thing. It's another reason why I was always so out of place because in New Zealand people just people are so chill, they just do whatever they want. But with me, like if I wanted to go to the movies with my friends, I would have to be like, Mom, is it okay if I go to the movies, or is it
Classic
okay if I
paan.
go for a sleepover? Like even up until I was like 18 years old, I would still be like, Mom, is it okay if I go out with my friends? Whereas
I
everyone else is
feel
just doing
you.
whatever they want. You know what I mean? And so
I
I
feel
definitely
you.
stuck out in that way. Like when my friends are always like, why do you always have to ask for permission? But and then moving here, I feel so at home, But then I
Mm-mm.
also have noticed there are certain qualities about me that are kind of really quite Kiwi that I didn't really notice until I moved here, and I, kind of stick out like a sore thumb sometimes. So, mm.
But what about life here now? Do you have friends? I mean, what about the loneliness factor? Is this something under control? Like now there are more talks on mental health and this new um, thing for you joining Miss Universe Philippines, it's going to really take a toll on um, being alone, doing this on your own, and your mental health. How are you coping and how are you dealing with it?
Mm. So lucky for me, like I said, I've been traveling back and forth to the Philippines basically since I was born. And so I have made friends along the way. And, through my travels and my photography, I built up a social media following. So I had, like online friends as well that I eventually met when I came here. And then, like I said, with the camp, like my family, they've introduced me to their friends. So I really do have a great network of people, as well as my family in Cavite. They're very supportive. None of them knew that I was actually planning on joining Miss Universe Philippines. And then when they saw me on Facebook, they were like, whoa, V, what's going on? But they're so incredibly supportive as well. So yeah, just knowing that I have that support network really helps a lot. And then the fact that I also have my support network in New Zealand, which is almost like a way of detaching from everything that goes on here. You know what I mean? And just, not really going back to my old life, but just like talking to everyone that's not in the whole pageant scene and they don't know what's going on and, that sort of thing. And, I know people think that with pageant newbies, we might not be as good at handling uh, the
Right.
obstacles that come with joining
Mm-hmm.
pageantry. Like you get thrown into the media. And it has been a really big shock for me, I'll be honest. But for me, even though I don't have the pageant experience per se, I have the life experience. And, I've been through some pretty bad stuff and I have still managed to come out on the other side. So, words on a screen and people with their fake accounts and stuff, with their negative comments, they don't worry me. It's okay.
It's
Mhm.
very refreshing to hear this one from you. And I like that you mentioned that you acknowledge this little thing that people talk about when you're a newbie. And this is actually a great segue for us because Philippine pageantry nowadays, it's not as happy as what you see in the articles saying Filipinos are the best pageant fans. They're like everywhere. Host a pageant in Timbuktu and they will be there. I
Yeah.
mean, the Filipinos have that they have that happiness factor that they can bring because they're scattered everywhere. But I think I would be doing you as well as our viewers a disservice if I don't even touch on this because what happened to the current Miss Universe Philippines, Rabia Mateo, being hounded on social media and getting herself trapped into these situations where her words are twisted and people uh, seem to have like a free pass in you know pushing her to her limits. How do you feel about this? Because now, as much as I want to celebrate women, as much as I want to really push for the girls, I am in on my own trying to hold back a little bit because I knew of how dangerous it was when we did that for Rabia. How are you
Mhm.
handling it this time? Because now the problem is very, very evident the way we handle or conduct ourselves on social media and the way social media has power over these candidates, over you eventually. You might think it's all love now, but I mean, not to scare you, but wait for the actual competition and you'll have probably personalities that you haven't encountered before. But you seem really strong. You mentioned your strength and you mentioned that people might think that just because you're a newbie, you can't handle this. Please let us know. How can you empower the others who are just, quiet as a mice trying to take this all in? We want to know strength from a Victoria Velasquez Vincent.
So, for me, like I said, these things don't happen in New Zealand. There's obviously negativity on social media, but not to the extent that I've witnessed so far. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
Uh, but for me, I try not to read them, like the negative
Okay.
comments. But obviously, when I'm reading positive comments, it's hard to just like filter them out. So obviously, you will come across them at some point. But the way that I deal with it mainly is when I see a negative comment, the first thing that I do is kind of distinguish between, is it just like a basher just trying to be a bully, or
Mhm.
or is it someone who is, yeah, they might be saying something negative and they might be saying it in a sort of, they might be delivering it in a negative way, but is there some sort of, constructive criticism hidden behind that? And that's actually something that I've experienced so far. So, for example, I don't read anything on Facebook anymore. For some reason, Facebook, there's a lot more negativity.
Yes.
Uh, but back when I did read a couple of weeks ago, when one of my photos somehow ended up all over the internet, I started seeing comments about people were saying that I look old in my photos. And that is
Mm-hmm.
never an insecurity that I've ever had. Like, I don't think I look old personally. But then when I thought about it and when I look back at the photos that they were talking about, I was like, maybe the makeup wasn't done perfectly to suit my face, or the lighting wasn't perfect, or, and so, and obviously everyone's got bad photos, and everyone's still learning what suits them best. And so it's all about just that, just, taking in what might seem like a negative comment, and, distinguishing if maybe there's a little bit of truth behind it. And so for me, when I read that comment, I was like, okay, my styling's got to change, because, the way that I was
Okay.
styled in that photo shoot wasn't perfect. So yeah, it's just like that. You've just got to decide, is it just a bully, or is it constructive criticism? If it is constructive criticism, should you apply it in any way? And yeah, that's the way that I deal with it,
So
at least.
you're super prepared for this. I want you to, yeah, to slay them with this calmness and, yeah, I mean, being sure of yourself. I mean, this is something that I've been trying to impart with the other girls, that these are empty talks. I mean, of course, unless you bring it to NBI or something, but these are all empty talks. And I like your approach, because I've also seen those comments about your styling, about how you appear in some of the photos. And I'm looking at you now. I think it really had something to do with the contouring. Because when I looked at your photos, they were more aquiline. But I'm sorry, Victoria, I live in an area where all the balut vendors pass by. It's a very Filipino thing, and my viewers know this. Unfortunately, this is something that I cannot do anything about, but it's okay because Kuya is trying to make money this evening. So
Mm-mm.
there you go. Yeah, I like your approach when it comes to handling social media. And I also check your social media account, although it's still pretty empty. I mean, I'm looking, it seems to be well balanced, because these are some of the things that we look for in the candidates. We want candidates to engage themselves on social media, but at the same time, keep something, you know, for their own. Not everything has to be public, but I like how you're able to curate your social media account. And every once in a while, I also get to see you doing some live stories and interacting with your fans. So prior to this interview, you had a little bit of interaction with your fans through speaking with them. And I think these are, at least the fans who have been following you, this is something that they've been holding on to, for the whole world to see how engaging you are when you converse, and how young looking and fresh looking you are. So now, Victoria, let's go to the actual pageant journey this time. So a lot of people are super excited because you're quite tall. You're 5'9", right?
I am, yes.
Is this, well, most likely, probably in New Zealand, it's not a huge deal, but do you feel like it's a huge deal here in the Philippines, especially when we're scouting the next representative of the Philippines?
Well, for me, height doesn't determine the impact that you're able to have. It doesn't define who you are as a person. So, I don't think too much of it. I know that being tall is considered something to, is considered a strong characteristic to have. But for me, I don't know. I was just born this way. And apparently it's because, so my brother, he's actually quite short. He's 2 years older than me, but he's far
Mm-hmm.
shorter than me. And my mom, when I was a baby, apparently she used to like massage, but like stretch my legs at the same time. And so
I know
apparently,
this, and it's a Filipino thing. My gosh.
apparently that's why I'm tall and I have these long noodle legs. Thanks, mom. But yeah, for me, height's just it's just a number. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, maybe because in the Philippines, whenever we would have like candidates who are great shoe-ins for the crown, usually height is questionable, but they have other attributes, like, they're really good in comm skills. So we've really yet to find maybe the whole package. And if you're the whole package, then we are in good company, you guys. So I have a question from Anthony de Guzman. I think this is a very interesting question. He asks, as a newbie to this pageant, what do you think is the most intimidating challenge of the Miss Universe Philippines competition? I heard that you will be, of course, trimmed down from 100 to 75, 50, and then 30 by a series of virtual challenges. But beyond the virtual challenges, which can be a challenge if you're not very techy like me, but what are the other aspects of Miss Universe Philippines that you find intimidating, if there is any?
Mm, I wouldn't say intimidating per se, but especially this year, we have a significantly less amount of time, unfortunately. And I guess the thing that it's not intimidating, what's the word that I need to use here? I don't know. The thing that I am going to find maybe a little bit challenging is the fact that we have such little time but so much to do, because I am such a time management person. I
Oh,
like to plan things in advance. I like things to be well organized. But in some cases, and especially in the pageant world, some things are so out of your hands, and things will pop up at the last minute. There'll be a deadline at the last minute, or a shoot that you have to organize in 2 days. And so for me, I think that's the most challenging thing, just having to do so much in such little time.
nice. So,
Mm-mm.
um, that little time thing that's going to factor in the competition, because the competition will be in September, and Miss Universe yesterday announced that the pageant will be held in December in Israel. How do we feel about this? If in case you win, you will definitely have a shorter time to prepare. Are you thinking about this very early on, or are you just focusing on winning Miss Universe Philippines first?
I, like I said, I like to be well prepared for things. I like to be organized. And I think, I do think Miss Universe Philippines, maybe they will choose someone who is very much ready at the
Mm-mm.
time of, is it September 25, I believe, is very much
Mhm.
ready at that point. It's just about polishing and, doing other minor changes or minor trainings. So if that's the route that they take, I'm coming from the point of view, I want to be someone that they believe is ready. You know what I mean? Despite not having all that pageant experience, I want to be that person who they see as being a good representative for our country, despite having such a short amount of time to prepare. And yeah, it's going to be a big challenge, especially because there are a lot of pageant veterans that are competing this year, a lot of big names. But I like to take that as motivation rather than intimidation.
This is something that we've all been very curious of, because right after the incident with, of course, with Rabia, right after the announcement and the shorter dates in between, I think a lot of people are now trying to be more smarter with their choices, smarter with their bets. Like in the past, we would be wowed with someone who has this huge clout factor, someone who has this amazing modeling potential, someone who's really tall. But nowadays, I think the focus of the conversation is we need someone who is ready, or who could be ready in a shorter period of time. Moving on to your pageant preparation, what is it that you really need to work on? Because we have the other things like pasarela, styling, and things like that. But what is it that you feel like you need to work on to be considered as one of the most ready candidates for Miss Universe?
Mm, Honestly, I think my biggest thing at the moment is probably still my styling. I haven't quite found the perfect styling for me, and it is because, I haven't done all the photo shoots and all the
Right.
I haven't got that pageant experience. And, my face, people say it's more editorial as opposed to beauty queen, because I have got, the strong eyebrows, the strong cheekbones, apparently. And so
That's
sometimes, yeah, this very strong eyes. Sometimes I do come across as a little bit too hard, if that makes sense, and a little bit too
okay.
fierce, as opposed to coming across as friendly and approachable, which I think I am. I just think sometimes I don't photograph that way.
But
So
you
I
know
think,
what? It's
yeah.
a challenge. Not just a challenge for you, but for the styling team. And
Mm,
if I may, yeah, we had some missteps in the past collectively, but the Philippines, these, we seem to have a really good track record in transformations. Like in in the talents and the skills of the creatives who work with the girls. So I guess this is something that, we cannot not talk about. But what about enhancements, Victoria? What about procedures and things like that? Is this something that you're open to? Is this something you feel like you need to pursue? Or is, because I know some pageant girls are like super okay with it, saying that if this is what I need to do to get ahead, I'm gonna do it. But what about you? I just want to learn how you're dealing with this, because on paper, on screen, even in pictures, you seem perfect. But of
Oh my
course, I
gosh.
don't know what's going in your mind. But yeah, how do you deal with the need to maybe fix things up, surgically or non-surgically?
Mm. So, first of all, I am so far from perfect, but thank you.
Yeah,
Uh,
diba?
for me, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing those procedures. If it's something that's going to give you more confidence, if it's something that is going to fix something that's been bothering you for a long time, then, what's the big deal? Everyone's entitled to do whatever they want with their bodies. As long as they're not hurting anyone else, then I don't think it's a big problem. So,
So, another concern that is being talked about by the social media pageant fans is, of course, language. So, Miss Universe Philippines, they introduced a scheme last year to allow the girls to speak in their own language or their own dialect. And some of the girls use this, just like Eliza Malinaw, um, one of the members of the camp as well. In this case, Victoria, a lot of people are now commenting and are asking, how important is it for a foreign candidate who transfers to the Philippines to try and represent the Philippines to learn the language, or at least use the language?
mhm. So for me, it is incredibly important. My heritage conservation degree, although it was focused around architecture, I'm still very passionate about maintaining Filipino culture. And so even though I was not raised to speak Tagalog, and it's not something that I can speak fluently as of yet. I'm 25 years old and I am trying my absolute hardest to learn. And yeah, I think it's a really important thing that half Filipino should at least try, or quarter Filipinos, part Filipino should at least try and do, just to maintain the language and to maintain our history and our culture and who we are as people. So yeah, most definitely, I think it is important and it is something I'm trying really hard to do. And for the most part, I can understand mostly Tagalog, and especially when
Sige
it
nga,
comes to
ano nga daw, sample nga daw.
grabe.
Maraming nagtatanong, sample nga diyan. Medyo dinudugo na daw sila.
So, so for me, I'm really good at like reading and understanding Tagalog, but when it comes to speaking, I just because I'm such a perfectionist, I'm trying to perfect the language before I embarrass myself and go and do it. But there are times when when I go down to the collect my food panda, or my packages
Wow.
downstairs, I'll speak to my guards in like Taglish and stuff. And even when I'm with my family, obviously there's no embarrassment when I talk to them in Tagalog. So, I mean, they laugh at me sometimes, but that's okay. But I think, yeah, I just want people to know, even though it's not something that I was raised to speak, it's something that I am trying really hard to learn. And yeah, it doesn't necessarily define the impact that you're able to make, but it is still important to try and incorporate it into your life and your future. So,
Well, that makes me happy, because this is one of the things that I talk about when I talk about like beauty pageantry, when I get into interviews. There are a number of halfies who have come to the Philippines and represent the Philippines, who have stayed here for more than a decade now, who just can't be bothered to learn the language or maybe use the language more often. And I am a little off put by it. I think a lot of people know this. This is something that I discuss freely. So I'm really happy that you're not giving me a pageant patty answer and saying, Tita, I'm gonna work on it. I mean, you're very honest in saying, you know, I'm not the best, but I'm gonna try. And I also like the way that you mentioned talking to the delivery guys, or having like seizing every opportunity to try and use the language. Because for those of you guys, I think some of you also know, I try to learn not just English. I try to learn other languages. I speak Japanese a little bit on and off. There is a
Mm.
switch because my family is based in Tokyo. My siblings are
Oh.
half Japanese.
Mm.
And I also tried to learn French in school, but I particularly remember that my French is still very wonky because I had no one to talk to. So this isn't
Mm-mm.
going to develop the skills if you don't have people who talk to you that way. But in this case, have you picked up some of our amazing gay lingos and like our own words in conveying happiness or excitement? Have you picked up some of these words?
I'm still, sometimes my friends, they say things and I'm like, because, because I'm studying Tagalog at the moment, I can acknowledge when something's a pure Tagalog word and when something's, like a twisted gay lingo version of a Tagalog word, but I never quite
Mhm.
know what they mean. So I always have to ask. So it's almost like I'm learning like two languages at the same time. You know what I mean?
Charot. Do you know what charot means?
I know what char means. And then I know that there's
Char,
like,
chore, chaz.
yeah, chiz. There's so many different variations of the word.
Yes.
So funny. Yeah.
Backbecks. Do you know what backbecks mean?
No, I don't know what big mix means.
Beckmans. These are our fabulous gay friends.
Ah, okay.
The Beckies, the backbeck. So yeah,
Ah, okay.
you
I knew
will
Becky's.
definitely pick up on the Becky. So there's
Okay.
like a little bit of a variation in, sometimes we remove letters, sometimes we add like 10 of them. So it's a really fun environment. So
Mm.
Victoria, we are nearing the end of our session, but I just want to find out how excited are you to fight at Miss Universe Philippines? Because you've been here for quite some time, and when they announced the top 100 girls, you are up against really, really powerful and popular girls. What's your plan of attack?
That I have to keep a secret.
Exactly. But let's throw them a little bit of a bone.
I think the most important thing is I'm just going to be me, and I'm not perfect. And there are some things that people might not like about me, but that's okay. As long as I'm me and as long as I like who I am and I like the way that I carry out my journey, then, that's the most important thing. And I'm very much excited because I actually moved here in January and
Mhm.
I've been waiting since January for this to happen. I've enjoyed, going back into quarantine and all of these things. After not having been experiencing COVID for so long in New Zealand, I have experienced all these things just patiently waiting for Miss Universe Philippines to start, just so I can finally push for the things that I believe in. And for it to finally be happening is almost a little bit surreal. You know what I mean? Like I was
Correct.
waiting for so long and now it's like, oh, okay, it's here, it's happening. Okay. So, no, I'm very excited, and I am so grateful as well for everyone that is supporting me, regardless of, me being a pageant newbie or me not having the big name that some other people have. So, thank you so much to everyone. I really appreciate it.
So, one of the last comments that I will be reading, this one is coming from JLZD. He says that he is seeing Charlene Gonzalez in you. Another one mentioned that Shamsi Supsup is, of course, an architect. She is, of course, the national director of Miss Universe Philippines. So, do you, apart from these women, people are now seeing semblance or maybe characteristics of the other illustrious beauty queens in you? But are there beauty queens that you look up to, or that you find like they could be like great pegs for at least styling or the way you conduct yourself for the rest of the competition?
So someone that I really look up to is, of course, Pia. I love the way that she, to this day, is still so incredibly engaging with her fans. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. Is I've got multiple group chats. I love to engage with them just because without them, I wouldn't be as hyped up as I currently am. So I want to maintain that gratitude and that connection to people, and I love that Pia does that. And then, as well as Pia, I love the way that Catriona is just so involved in everything, or every process that she went through when it came to Miss Universe, she was very much involved in it. And I see myself in her a little bit because she's a creative herself, and she's a
Yes.
visionary, and I'm very much like that as well. Like I envision things and I want to bring them to life so badly that yeah, I'm so excited for everything that's to come. I truly am.
And I am really excited for you because, it's also very different when you have a girl who's fighting in the competition and that girl has a say. I mean, it's really very difficult to have like a voice in the competition, especially if you're new, especially if you're unsure of yourself. So a lot of the creative decisions would always come from individuals who know the trade. So if you're saying, you want to be more involved, just like Catriona, you want to be like decisive on these things, yeah, we support you. Go for it. I mean, it's always nice to have someone in control with, just the great use of people around her to support her. But then this is your fight, Victoria. So we are so happy that we finally get to hear a few things about you. And I guess my last question is something that is just for me. Victoria, what's your favorite food? And what's your ulam tonight?
I actually, I was so busy today, I didn't have time to cook. So literally just before we
Patay.
got onto this live, I ordered Grab Delivery, and I was going down Show My before we jumped online just before. So that was what I had for dinner. But my favorite food, mm, my favorite Filipino food is menudo. I think menudo is
Wow,
incredibly underrated, completely
underrated.
underrated, completely. I love menudo. And then aside from Filipino food, my favorite food is ooh, so hard to choose. Because actually, when I eat at home, I eat vegan, but when I eat out, I
Oh.
indulge.
Wow, so
But
you're very
probably
flexible.
yeah, yeah, especially because it's
Oh,
so hard
okay.
to eat vegan and be social at the same time. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
Especially with
right,
the lack of
right,
vegan
right.
options. So I don't want to cut off my
Oo.
social life, social life, sorry. But probably pizza. I love pizza.
Pizza, ayan naman pala tayo eh. Support-support tayo sa pizza dyan. And other shallow things, before we use up the time, I want to know about your favorite movie. I mean, who are we dealing with? Are we dealing with someone who's into zombies or period
So
films?
my favorite movie is actually the movie Taken, and you're going to be very upset that we don't have enough time to have this conversation, but
Talaga
uh,
ba?
I love
Sige,
I
push
love the
natin.
movie. I love the movie Taken just because of the relevance that it kind of has to my life. So when I was 3 years old, when we traveled back here to Cavite one time, I was taken, and
Okay,
so just that
okay.
connection that I have to the film, even though the stories are a little bit different, just the way that the film was carried out and the way that Liam Neeson acts as the father, I can really see my dad in him. So it's kind of more like a sentimental connection that I have to that film. So yeah.
Wow, now that it has come up, I came across a comment here, and it was just so fast, I wasn't able to get to read it. But
Mm-mm.
it was, it had something to do with being taken. I don't know if this is something that you're comfortable in sharing, but when I was reading the comment in the peripheral, I was like, what? Did this really happen? Is this something that you can share, perhaps? Or
Yeah.
it's okay if you don't want to talk about it?
No, it's okay. It's actually so
Okay.
people would have seen it in one of my Instagram photos. They would have seen the
Okay.
caption. So it's kind of a long story, but basically, when we were growing up, my dad always stayed back in New Zealand every time we came back to the Philippines, just because he was always so busy with work. But there was one year when I was 3 years old, we came here. We went to back to Cavite, and
Mhm.
because my mom, she was the tita that was living overseas. When she comes back home to the Philippines, she's very much like how do I word it? Like almost like the head of the family because she,
Okay.
she does come from overseas. And
Okay.
so yeah, we were at the market with my family and my mom was, buying supplies for the week, buying everything that we needed. And when she went to pay for something, when she turned around, someone had taken me. And I mean, it all happened within the space of about an hour. But luckily, my tita and my cousins, they knew the area well, and they knew the people in the area well, and they managed to find me again.
Oh my God.
And that's actually contributed a lot to why I'm here and why I want to do what I want to do. So, I think when things like that happen, people can take one of two perspectives. They can either let it define them and their perspective of the Philippines, for example, in my case, or they can let it inspire them. And for me, it did the latter. And, I know that whatever the reason was that those people decided to do that, it would have been, out of desperation, whether it would have been, for monetary reasons or whatever. And so that's another reason why I really want to help push for a change in the Philippines to try and solve an issue that is so incredibly deep-seated, but it doesn't need to be forever. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And uh, so these sorts of crimes, they happen as a result of, of poverty in a lot of cases. And so I really want to push to try and help people get out of that cycle. And it really has inspired me to help the Philippines become better, you know. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this because it's not very common. I mean, I've heard, ladies being harassed and some of the candidates going through bullying and other things like that. This is really serious. I mean, we talk about taken, but yeah, you're very, very lucky. The people who were able to find you were very, very lucky. And we feel like we're also blessed because you're here and you didn't let this one affect your decisions of coming back. Girl, bakit? Nakakaloka ka. But
people think I'm crazy, truly. But
sobra.
for me,
Okay, lalayo na ako. Hindi na ako babalik sa Pilipinas.
For me, I'm so incredibly blessed that I did not fall complete victim to the circumstances and the situation that happened. But I know that there are so many other kids and so many even adults that are out there that have fallen victim to those sorts of things that weren't lucky enough to escape from them. And so, yeah, it's really a big driving force behind, the way in which I want to contribute to the Philippines. And I hope people see that even though I am a half Filipina, I wasn't born and raised here. I don't, speak the language fluently. My heart is in the right place, and yeah, I want people to see that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Victoria, votes will be very, very important for this edition. We have a few requests. So one of the requests is, could you say something in Spanish? Because everybody read that you have Irish, Spanish, Filipino blood.
Okay, story time. So, so my mom, she is part Spanish. Obviously, the Philippines was colonized by Spain for a very long
Okay.
time. So a
Eto
lot of
tayo
Filipinos have Spanish blood. But you know what? Because of that, and because people saw that, maybe I could speak Spanish and I could speak Spanish in Costa Rica and all these things, I was like, you know what? I was like, I'll try and learn Spanish if you want me to learn Spanish. And then the other day was it yesterday? They announced that it's going to be in Israel instead of Costa Rica. So
Israel,
I was
right.
like, oh my goodness, I've been learning Spanish this time. And so as soon as the announcement came out,
Shalom.
I messaged my coaches and I was like, does that mean I can stop learning Spanish now? And they were like, it's time to start learning Hebrew.
It's time to start learning Hebrew. That's right. But you know what? Spanish can be very helpful. I mean, there's a huge fan base of, Latin pageant lovers out there. So it could come in handy. So, Victoria, I will no longer take up a lot of your time. A lot of these people want more, but I will share you with the other vloggers now that everything is more open. You're a lot more free to have these interviews. I'm sure a lot of the vloggers will be lining up for your precious yes. So everybody wants to say, for you to say Victoria Velasquez, Philippines, how are you going to introduce yourself on the Miss Universe Philippines page? Please indulge us.
On the Miss Universe Philippines stage.
Stage, yes. How will you introduce yourself?
My name is Victoria Velasquez Vincent. I am 25 years old and I am proudly representing the historical capital of the Philippines, Cavite.
Ayun! The land of heroes. I think we have a common friend, Angelica Alita. I don't know if you are watching. Kung hindi nyo na itatanong, there was, back in the day, medyo kapareho kami ng fest ni Angelica Alita. Twinnie, maraming salamat. Victoria, thank you so much for spending an evening with me. This was an eye-opener. I mean, thank you to everyone. Spotlight Stealer, maraming salamat sa iyo. Bobby Blast, maraming salamat. As well as sa mga nanood sa atin ngayon, we have more than 1,083, more than 1,000 viewers. And
Wow.
because I will be saving this in my YouTube channel, we will have more viewers. So, Victoria, before we go, please invite our viewers. Let them know how they can help you advance in the competition.
Firstly, thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. With the competition, there will be a series of online challenges, and you can vote for those online challenges using the Miss Universe Philippines app, which I believe you can download on the App Store, the Google Play Store, whatever other store there is. And so, yeah, that's the way to vote. I believe there will be announcements coming soon as to how and when this will be happening. So just stay tuned. But yeah, thank you so much for all of your support. I really appreciate it. And I can't wait to represent Cavite in the best way that I can and do all the Caviteños out there proud.
Maraming salamat. Thank you, Victoria. We will DM each other. Thank you and good luck on your journey. We are so excited. We're always welcoming when it comes to fresh faces with potential. And let me tell you, you have potential. So keep steady. Thank you for indulging us and good night, Victoria.
Good night. Thank you so much, Tita.
Maraming salamat. So I'm gonna end the live broadcast here.
Sure.
Salamat, guys. Thank you,
everyone. Maraming salamat.
Cavite daw. PH Pageantry. Bye. Ayun. So I ended the broadcast and
It's
Victoria,
pa,
OMG, maraming salamat.
Tita, we're still live pa.
We're still live pa pala.